2007. What a fantastic year for gaming. I could go on and on about the insane library of video games that came out during this time, but today I'm only going to talk about one of them. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, the conclusion to one of the best trilogies in gaming history. This would also mark the final Metroid game worked on by Retro Studios, for the next 12 years at least. However, this would be a unique project for Retro, because they would transition from working on the GameCube to Nintendo's upcoming console, the Wii. Or as it was known back then, the Revolution. Kinda wish they kept that name, but I digress. The Wii was not a traditional console by any means. I know I was confused when I first saw the Wii remote. How was I gonna play video games with this? Sure enough, it would all make sense once you saw one of the many commercials.
We would like to play.
That's right, Nintendo was not going to focus on graphical power like the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 did. They were aiming to bring motion-controlled gameplay experiences that even your grandma could enjoy. So how is this going to work for a Metroid Prime game? Retro Studios was wondering this as well, so they had to take an additional year of development just to figure out the control scheme. And in my opinion, they did a good job. It's a little gimmicky here and there, but not Skyward Sword gimmicky, you know what I mean? Now for the last two Prime games, I used the Metroid Prime Trilogy versions of those games, but for this one, I'm just going to use the standard Wii version, for one reason and one reason only. Here's a scene from Metroid Prime 3.
Damn! They're targeting the planetary defense system.
Now here's that same scene in the trilogy.
No, they're targeting the planetary defense system.
Don't try and erase history, Nintendo. You don't see Sega doing that with this. Prime 3's story begins like every other Prime game, with... Wait, hold on. Oh man, my expectations are being seriously subverted right now. This transmission cuts to an unknown location, where we find out that Dark Samus is alive and out for blood. Samus wakes up from this nightmare, puts on the Varia suit, and gets ready for the next mission. This time, we actually open up inside Samus's ship and get to take control of it. Very minimally, of course, but this opening is to get us familiar with the pointer controls by transmitting identity codes and pushing levers. You know, things you'll never do in this game again.
Unidentified vessel, please switch to a secure radio frequency and transmit your identity code.
Wait a minute. Is that spoken dialogue in a Metroid game? Yeah, previous Metroid games have had some voice acting, but not to the extent of Prime 3. Rather than starting the game off on a mysterious planet, Samus lands on Galactic Federation ship Olympus for a mission debrief, and here she encounters a lot of NPCs, some of them being pretty rude.
I'm sorry, I'm on duty. I can't talk right now.
What? You're too busy to talk to me, Samus Aran? I've saved planets, bro! Alright, you know what? Screw you.
Warning. Hostile weapons.
Hey man, hey, I'm cool. By Metroid standards, this amount of active storytelling is very unprecedented. It gives off the opposite feeling of dread and isolation the series is known for, and is one of the reasons why many consider this the weakest entry in the Prime trilogy. I, however, loved this when I first played the game back in 2007. It's not an amazing story by any means, but after playing two Metroid Prime games that were all about Samus being alone, I wanted to see her interact with other characters. Even today, I appreciate the risk Retro Studios took with adding this big story, which I should probably start talking about, shouldn't I? So the Galactic Federation has hired a group of bounty hunters to take on an assignment. To be fair, I would hire them too if my soldiers were the equivalent of stormtroopers wearing red shirts. These bounty hunters are the Ice-Cold Rundis, the Mechanical Gore, and the shape-shifting Gandreda. The Federation's problem is that their supercomputers called Aurora units have been infected with an unknown virus of space pirate origin. The hunters' jobs would be to distribute a vaccine to each unit in the system. That is, after they fight off the space pirates that just started attacking. This leads Samus and the rest of the hunters to go back to their ships and assist in the defense of planet Norion. You know, right now, this feels more like a linear first-person shooter than a Metroid game. It kinda reminds me of Halo 2. Wait. This makes a lot more sense when you find out that Metroid Prime 2 came out only a week after the massive bombshell that was Halo 2. Guess which game underperformed? So it really isn't surprising that aspects of Prime 3 feel more like Halo in comparison. I'm not claiming that these decisions were made as a direct result of Halo, but it wouldn't surprise me if good old Master Chief had some sort of an impact on Prime 3's development. Also, Prime 3 was released a month before Halo 3. Guess which one of them underperformed? Fortunately, a lot of this linearity is felt mostly in the beginning, where Samus acquires the missiles, fights the Berserker Lord, and lands on Norion. The Space Pirates knocked out the base's planetary defense system, so it's up to Samus and the Hunters to activate the generators and bring it back online. This is where we finally get to know our fellow Hunters, if just for a little bit. We don't really get any deep, lengthy, heart-to-heart moments with them, but if you scan their logbook entries, you'll find some interesting details, like how Gore is actually a pretty generous dude, Gandreda considers Samus a friendly rival, and Rundis keeps trophies from his kills. Generally, they're likable characters who help Samus in some way, shape, or form during this mission. Here you also acquire the Grapple Lasso, a tool that requires you to literally whip your nunchuck attachment to pull off debris and enemy shields. I hear a lot of people complain that the Wii gimmicks are one of the reasons they can't continue playing this game. And if you've played Skyward Sword, you would know that these gimmicks are child's play. Oh boo-hoo, you have to whip your nunchuck every once in a while? Whatever, grow a spine. This mission also introduces you to the PED Troopers, soldiers whose weapons are enhanced through Phazon, the deadly element responsible for all the events that have occurred in this entire trilogy, and the Galactic Federation have weaponized it. What could go wrong? No time to talk about that though, because Ridley is back again.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
This encounter leads to a pretty epic boss fight down a bottomless pit Gandalf style. Very bold of the developers to make us fight Ridley this early. I'm sure we won't see him again after this. Nope. Not at all. In the middle of this mission, a giant meteor appears out of a wormhole heading towards the planet, so getting that defense system back online becomes a more pressing matter. And just when the Hunters are about to get it online, Dark Samus appears and blows them away. Fortunately, Samus wakes up, turns the system back on, and falls into a 1-month coma.
You got knocked the f*** out!
When she wakes up, she's informed that Phazon has entered her bloodstream. So the Galactic Federation, in typical galactic fashion, decide to take that Phazon and weaponize it, equipping Samus with the PED suit. When you hold the plus button, it will bring you into hyper mode, making your attacks stronger with Phazon enhanced weaponry. Samus is then debriefed by Aurora Unit 242 that the other Hunters were also enhanced with PEDs and were sent to the planets Brio, Elysia, and the Space Pirate homeworld. Oh my god. Instead of one planet, we get to go to 3 more. That's like 4 Metroid Prime games in one! Joking aside, these planets are about the average size you would expect from a traditional area in a Metroid game, having you explore the locations around the Leviathan seeds that have impacted the planets and corrupted them with Phazon. So in typical fashion, every living creature tries to kill you. Because Metroid. What I've noticed after playing these games back to back is that Prime 3 places a heavier emphasis on combat. This was apparent at the beginning, but even as you continue, you discover that there are far more combat segments than in previous games. Yes, I know, combat in Metroid is not a new thing, but Prime 3 brings it to another level, with enemies that have different armor types, a mission where you have to defend a floating platform, hell, there's even an escort mission! These are features you'd expect to see in like BioShock Infinite or something, not a Metroid game. It's clear Retro Studios tried to appeal to both the Metroid crowd and the sci-fi shooter crowd with this game, but it just doesn't work when the two sides aren't even on the same coin. In spite of this, it's still more Metroid than it is an action shooter, but that just makes the action shooter parts even more distracting. Perhaps this would be less of a problem if this game didn't have hyper mode, which turns you into a Phazon god. You know, for a while, I considered Metroid Prime 3 my favorite game in the trilogy. Not the best one, though. It was the second best to me, with Prime 2 being the worst. And after playing these games back to back, I can confirm one thing. Opinions change. I'm so glad that I have nostalgia to still make me love every bit of Metroid Prime 3, but I'll admit, a lot of features in this game just don't work. Hyper Mode is the worst offender of this. When you switch to this mode, it'll convert one of your energy tanks into Phazon, which you can blast at enemies, and it's super strong. And since the game is designed around this feature, a lot of the enemies are tougher and even have their own hyper modes, which make them almost impossible to kill without Phazon weaponry. You'd think that having Phazon energy tied to your health would make this feature more balanced, but it really doesn't. Health and energy tanks are so easy to find in this game that you can use hyper mode to your heart's content. And when you get to a certain point, the Phazon tries to corrupt you during hyper mode, not allowing you to escape until you drain your energy tank or keep it level for 25 seconds. I know this is supposed to add more tension and increase the likelihood of death, but it actually makes things easier. Because your Phazon energy keeps going up, 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 it's hard to run out of ammo. I decided to see how much I could abuse the game with hyper mode, so I used it to beat Rundis in less than 2 minutes. Hold up. Rundis? The cool guy who helped you escape a bottomless pit? That Rundis? Yep, due to Phazon corruption, he's a bad guy now. And so are the rest of the hunters, meaning you'll have to fight and kill all 3 of them. This was a good writing choice. It makes Samus's battle against Dark Samus a much more personal vendetta. After you defeat them, Samus visibly expresses her sadness and anger, only making her that much more determined to end Phazon corruption. Story-wise, it's nothing revolutionary, but it's a nice touch. Now as for the game itself, remember when I said the Echo Visor was the most useless visor in Metroid history? Well, that's because I completely forgot about the Command Visor. Yikes. You use this visor to control your gunship, letting it know where to land, what to pick up with the crane, and where to attack after acquiring the rockets. It's mainly used for blowing up blockades, but during my entire play session, I completely forgot you could use the missiles to attack enemies on the ground too. I'm honestly kind of annoyed they made the ship so involved in this game, because when I think I'm about to find a useful expansion, it turns out to be a ship missile expansion. Like I'm ever going to use those outside of puzzle solving. What a waste. Also gone are super missiles and power bombs, replaced by hyper mode weaponry you unlock as you destroy Leviathan seeds. And as you unlock more weapons, those being the Plasma and Nova beams, you won't be able to switch your beams or even go back to the power beam. Which is honestly fine, because the Nova beam also opens plasma doors and it makes your attacks more powerful. Same goes for when you upgrade to ice missiles, which still open regular missile doors, so why even go back? However, they're not as effective against Metroids as they usually are. That's because these little guys are now Phazon Metroids, which have the ability to turn transparent to dodge missile attacks. This is another one of the 4,397th instances where you'll have to use hyper mode to take them out quickly. There are other variations of Metroids in this game that don't even look like Metroids, such as the Hopper Metroids, the Miniroids, and a Metroid Hatcher. Sorry, 3 Metroid Hatchers that you have to take down throughout the game. You do this by shooting their tentacles, stunning them, and ripping the tentacles out with the lasso. I could handle one of these repetitive boss fights, but 3? No thank you. Fortunately, the rest of the bosses in Metroid Prime 3 are solid. Maybe not as good as in Prime 2, but still better than in Prime 1. I just wish hyper mode wasn't a thing so they'd be more of a challenge. Though, to be fair, you will need it to defeat the bosses within the Leviathan seeds. One of them totally looks like Kraid, and the other is Ridley. Again.
How many times do we have to—
These bosses are fine, but it's the fights with the hunters that are the real highlight of this game, partly because of their emotional impact on the story. Especially Gandreda, who shapeshifts into other enemies and the hunters. And do I even need to talk about her death scene? I still get nightmares. Right now I'm trying to think about why I thought this was my favorite Metroid game. It might be because it has more of a story and I just like games with story. But then I remembered I love graphics. Yeah, I know graphics don't make a game, but man, do I love me some beautiful graphics. The Wii was only a smidge more powerful than the GameCube, but you wouldn't have known that if you looked at Metroid Prime 3. Retro Studios absolutely nailed the art direction with this game, even if the faces look weird. But to be fair, so did Halo 3's. What stands out the most about Prime 3 compared to the rest of the trilogy is its excellent usage of lighting combined with the color of the environments. It makes planets like Elysia look jaw-droppingly gorgeous, and the space pirate homeworld look dangerously sinister. It really does irk me that we haven't seen a Nintendo IP with a stylized and realistic art style like this since then, and I really hope Metroid Prime 4 fills that void when it releases. Okay, I think it's time we get to the finale of this game, so you know the drill. If you don't want to be spoiled, click this link right here, but if you have small children in the room, get them out of there. They don't want to see this. At the beginning, the Galactic Federation Admiral Dane explains that one of their ships named the GFS Valhalla had been hijacked by space pirates and went missing. Well, later on, you find the ship and... Nintendo. Yep, there's a lot of dead bodies on this ship, and touching them does this. Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. This ship is definitely the darkest and creepiest area in all of Metroid. Period. There is no debate. Also, and I just found out about this, when you enter a vacuumed area of the ship, you can see Samus's breath fog up her visor. Whoever came up with this idea deserves a raise. Seriously. Anyway, this ship contains a space pirate command codes that you'll need to create a wormhole and head to the planet Phase, the source of all Phazon. This means, yet again, you'll have to find more collectibles scattered throughout the game world, or solar system rather. These collectibles are energy cells, and putting them in the ship's slots will bring power to certain areas, allowing you to go deeper within the ship. Fortunately, unlike the Chozo artifacts and Sky Temple keys, these things are way easier to find when you're not looking for them. It helps even more that you don't need to find all of them to get to your goal, because there are branching paths in the ship that just lead to some collectibles. So when Samus gets the codes and punches them into the Leviathan vessel, this opens a wormhole, leading her and the Galactic Federation fleet to the planet Phase, where she avoids the battle and goes straight to the planet's surface. This causes the Phazon in her system to go berserk and try to corrupt her, but her suit delays this process long enough to allow her to continue. However, if the meter above her head fills up, she's gone, baby. Energy pickups will bring the meter down, but if you only collected like 2 energy tanks during this playthrough, I'm so sorry. After fighting her way to the center of the planet, she finally encounters Dark Samus, and thus the battle for the entire universe breaks out in this epic 3-part boss battle against her and the corrupted Aurora Unit 313. The one in Prime 2 was better. On top of these battles just not being that hard, it doesn't really feel like there was any major threat to the universe in this game. With Metroid Prime 2, I felt the looming threat of the Ing from the very beginning, and I felt the pressure of taking down the Emperor Ing at the end. While Phazon was undoubtedly a huge threat throughout the trilogy, finding out it came from the planet Phase an hour before going there to destroy it didn't make it as impactful. It was like finding out Palpatine was the threat the entire time in the new Star Wars trilogy, but only in the final movie. Fortunately, Metroid Prime 3 is not nearly as bad as Rise of Skywalker, but we'll get to that never. Anyway, you start off fighting Dark Samus in a battle similar to the ones in Metroid Prime 2, but when you defeat her, she jumps into the Aurora Unit 313, where you have to fight her in that for the rest of the time. They really should have had you fight Dark Samus last. It would have made the boss fight that much more personal. And I hate to keep comparing this final battle to the one in Prime 2's, but that game did it so much better. You got to use more of the weapons you've acquired over the game to take down Emperor Ing and then Dark Samus. With this, you just shoot the Aurora unit in a few spots until Phase 3, where it turns into a floating head. For the final boss in the final game of a trilogy, it's quite underwhelming. When you beat the unit and Dark Samus, the planet begins to explode. But there's no need for an escape section because Samus escapes the planet and sends the Galactic Feds one final transmission. After that, she visits Elysia to remember her fallen comrades, and as she flies away, someone decides to follow. That's it. That's all of it. And that's all there's going to be for a long time. I'm glad that they announced Metroid Prime 4, but even knowing that game's coming, I still feel somewhat of an emptiness every time I beat Prime 3. A bittersweet emptiness, because I know this trilogy will always be with me no matter what happens, and I can always go back and replay it. Man, I just want this story to keep going. And I know Metroid Prime 4 is somewhere on the horizon, but man, like, the Prime Trilogy has a certain atmosphere and charm to it that I haven't seen Nintendo match since the last game in the Prime Trilogy. And I know there are games like Breath of the Wild out there with amazing atmospheres and whatnot, but Metroid is especially unique. It doesn't try to be a kid-friendly franchise like every other Nintendo franchise. It's its own separate thing. It's not mature like, you know, Call of Duty and Halo and stuff, but it's the darkest franchise Nintendo has, I believe. And I want to see that element of maturity continue with Metroid Prime 4. And man, it's just going to be a long wait until that game. So let's see what else I got.
Oh no!
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. First, I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters, Justice2Free, Stephanie Ferris, Smash JT, and Sean Long for supporting me on Patreon. If you like this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you are new to not miss any more videos in the future. But in the meantime, this has been FerrisWheelPro, and I will see you on the next ride.